All right, you beautiful nerds. Welcome back. Episode 2.1. Episode 2.1 will be the assembly of the cockpit for the HKM B-17. Again, this one's going to be Texas Raiders, just in case you hadn't noticed that in the bottom right-hand side of the screen. So, dropping all the points into charisma for today, it's time to get back to work and do another one of these videos. Right off the bat, you can see that the seat frames on the HKM kit are considerably different to the Revell. There is a bunch more parts associated with them that have to be assembled instead of just the two single piece frames. So a little bit more complicated, a lot more fun to go ahead and build. As a lot more time between painting. I find the assembly part to be the enjoyable part of this hobby, whereas the painting part I don't enjoy as much. So, awesome segue, straight into painting. We're painting the seats. I am going to try and hand paint a lot more of this model than other models I've done previously, some of which have recorded, some of which I have not. One of the biggest notes, if you're hand painting and you don't typically do it, or if you're just getting started out, is make sure you thin it. So even if you're not using an airbrush, go ahead and thin it just like you would with an airbrush. Typically a 50-50 mixture is just fine. I've seen people use 60-40, 60% thinner. It'll work either way, but you do want to thin your paint. So when I first started this hobby, and then when I restarted this hobby after I was in college, I didn't know this, and so the first couple of model kits I built, just the paint jobs weren't good because I was hand brushing the entire plane, and the paint straight out of the can is a little bit too thick. It's a bit too thick, let's be honest. And so if you put thinner on it, it just levels it out a lot more. You don't get streaks in your paint as much, and it really just improves the overall quality of the paint job. I've only managed to do one high quality paint job without thinner, and I still don't know how I did it, and I don't think I ever will. But that's beside the point. So yeah, the seat frames are a lot more complex. They're a different shape than the Revell kit as well. What I have found in doing some background research is that the seats in the HKM kit are the correct shape. The Revell kit has kind of a centralized peak, which is molded to be somewhat of a head cushion. I so far haven't found a B-17 that has that. So the HKM kits are more accurate in this case. And if you were wanting to build the Revell kit and make it a little bit more realistic, that's something you could do. Is just to slightly change the shape of the B-17 or the Revell B-17 seats and make them more like these HKM seats. And there's plenty of pictures of these online. There's a ton of pictures of B-17 cockpits online. We are fortunate enough to have several of them in flying shape, despite that latest on that AD, but that's beside the point. So moving on to photo etch. I don't have a whole lot of experience with photo etch personally. It is something I would like to get more experience in, and I have another kit I'm slowly working on the side. I am recording it, but I'm not going to keep it up. I'm not going to keep up with it on this channel until much later. And it's got a bunch more photo etch that I purchased for it. And working with that's going to be a challenge for me because I haven't got a whole lot of experience with it. I am looking forward to the task. Like many of you may be watching this or taking notes for techniques that you want to try. Not that I'm showing anything particularly special here so far with this model. I'm doing the same thing, watching people with other photo etch, particularly ship kits. There's a bunch of photo etch in a lot of the ship building that I've seen. And we do have some ships to do at some point later on. Similar to the Revell kit, I am going to put on my own kind of custom-made seat backs. This is just a realism thing. The B-17s have yellow seat cushions in a lot of the pictures that I have seen. And I think just breaking up the monotony of the green seats really does make the kit look better when it's completed. And so I'm just taking a little bit of styrene, cutting it to the rough dimensions I want, as long as I'm consistent between seats within, plus or minus a 16th or less of an inch. Then seat cushions will match each other enough that it's believable. And so we're going to put putty on them because obviously styrene's perfectly flat, or as close to perfectly flat as it can get. And I'm just reminded of the Rick and Morty True Level skit, which is a pretty good video. If you haven't seen it, highly recommend. Going back to the kit, yeah, we're just putting a little bit of putty on and we're sanding it, trying to make some creases and get some non-uniformity in that surface. That makes it look a little bit better. Here I am applying primer. Yellow paint is a particularly tricky thing to deal with. If most of us, or most of you watching this video have done this hobby before, or probably have done this hobby before, or getting into it. Word to the wise of you that haven't done much yet, especially in yellow. Yellow is a tricky one. Realistically, airbrushing is the way to go for yellow. It's very hard to hand paint yellow and have a consistent color come out. If you're going to do so, I'd recommend putting down a white base coat first. If you can get a white primer, something that'll go relatively uniform, it's in your best interests, honestly. So typically white first and then yellow is a good idea. So if you're spraying large areas of yellow, like if you're doing a German BF-109 or something that's got the yellow nose, I would highly recommend doing the white coat first. It really will even out that yellow color and give you a higher quality. You will have noticed I used a panel line wash there. It didn't really take too much to the seat, so I'm going to go back and try and do that again before I close up the fuselage of the aircraft. But I think overall, once I had these installed and once I had the photo etch seatbelts installed, it did work out pretty well. On the subject of seatbelts for B-17s, if you look at a lot of the pictures of the period when these aircraft were most active, and even some of the, not museum aircraft, well, I guess museum aircraft as well, but also the flying models, a lot of the B-17s didn't have shoulder belts. So that is something, if you are going after a B-17 kit you're going for a hyper accurate based on one of the aircraft, be aware of that they don't have a whole lot of them out there that have the shoulder belts installed. Another thing, we'll cover it a lot later, but a lot of the B-17s in World War II lost their de-icing boots or had their de-icing boots damaged and removed, because obviously leading edge of the wing you're getting shot at. You don't want to continuously be replacing de-icing boots essentially every single flight. So they didn't. They basically just took them off and that was that. So again, just paying attention to the resource and reference material will get you a long way. I put them on because I thought they were cool. I haven't actually looked at Texas Raiders to see if they had the shoulder belts on that aircraft. It is something I will go back and check, mostly for my academic knowledge. But I do like having the seatbelts on there. Personally, I think it looks better. But again, your mileage may vary. That's what this is all about. Moving on, the yokes are pretty simple. I did do some background research on something else, looking for resource pictures of the cockpit. And what I noticed is the bottom of the yoke, which I thought was a rubber boot, more so looks like a canvas kind of bag that goes around it, a canvas material. So I think at some point I may go back before I close up the cockpit and repaint the bottom of the yokes to be a canvas, like tan color material, and that'll be back to a little bit more realistic. The yokes on the actual aircraft do have a Boeing decal in the middle. I don't know that my hand is steady enough to replicate that, and I also don't know that my printer is good enough to make my own decal, so I may also take a stab at that. If I do, I'll record both and provide like a little bit of an update. But yeah, that's really small. I mean, that paintbrush is tiny, and the center of that yoke is even smaller. So it's and also it gets into the point of, can you even see it? So I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't think I'll do it. I may. If I do it, I'll film it. If I film it, I'll put it on here as an update. Doing the cockpit floor, that's called out as an anti-skid coating in the instructions, and you can actually see it in the top left of your screen. I would think that an anti-skid of that time period would just be like a rubberized coating. I imagine it's not green like this, but Texas Raiders did have a green cockpit floor. So green is the way we're going to go. As we continue through this, I am going to paint the pedestal for the throttle quadrant and all the throttle controls black. Here in the top right, you can actually see a view from one of the technical manuals of the B-17 showing the throttle levers. Again, I really wish the throttles were in this kit. They're also not in the Revell kit. I think they're pretty cool, and I'd love to make them. I'm going to give it a shot, I think, but it's going to be very difficult based on the scale, which is likely the reason they're not included. And even though they're not going to be super visible, I will likely give it a shot. I'll record it, and I'll probably attach them right before we go ahead and put the internal structure of the aircraft into the fuselage. There's considerably more. Again, I think I've mentioned that on the HKM. The HKM comes with a full nose build-up, including a navigator's position. The Revell Kit does not. We'll get to that in a later episode. The next episode for the HKM kit's going to be the bomb bay. It's got a full bomb bay with bombs. I think there's 6. So at this point, it's built already. I think in one of the shots later on in this video, you'll see there's significantly more of the internals built than I'm showing here. I am trying to catch up with videos, but video editing does take a little bit more time to do, and also voice recording. Anyway, moving on. The fit on this model is actually really good. I didn't have any real issues. Later on, you're going to see me take a little bit of a file to the front of the cockpit floor just to get it to fit into the panel. It wasn't so much an issue with the fit of the kit as I think the added paint just made it a little bit too thick to fit into the slots in the panel floor, or a panel bulkhead. A little bit of sanding took it right down, and it wasn't really a huge issue. I would like to take a quick mention here that the HKM instructions, they don't give a whole lot of detail on painting, details. So it'll, for the most part, just tell you to paint a panel a single color, right? Here, you can see on the bottom left 2, that's the HKM panels. The right hand 2 are the ones that I've manufactured for the Revell kit, just to give a little bit more cockpit detail. But on the HKM, it actually gives you the full oxygen cylinders. It gives you the portable oxygen tank attached to the permanently mounted oxygen cylinders. You've got the other parts that are in the footwell, kind of the kick panels for where the pilot and co-pilot sit. I'll get to those in a little bit. But there's enough source material out there you can go and find what colors these things were. So there's plenty of pictures of the yellow oxygen cylinders, the intercooler controls, which are for the right-hand kick panel co-pilot seat. It's that little kind of triangular piece there up to where my index finger's covering right there. There's plenty of pictures of that. I've seen a couple that are green. I've seen a couple that are black. You've got the electrical panels on the pilot side kick panel, and the oxygen regulators, oxygen feed lines from the pressurized oxygen tanks, and also the panel light is on this kick panel here, or sidewall, whatever you want to call it. I'm sure there's a technical term for it somewhere. But there's plenty of resource material out there for seeing those. Most of those electrical panels and gauges are black. Again, you've got metallic lines for the oxygen feed delivery to the pilot and co-pilot, and so that's usually going to be a silver metallic material. Valve bodies as well, either silver or black. So just added little details like that really help it to stand out. And then when you're all done adding those coloration details, go ahead and give it a little weather. Put a little oil wash on it. I haven't done that yet in this video. I will do it later before I go to install it. And just, again, there's plenty of source material on all these details, adding which colors or what features should be which color that you can go ahead and check out. Now, the remainder of this video is more or less going to be me adding some smaller surface detail, some paint detail to this kit, and then doing the finish assembly. We've already talked about the fit, we've already talked about source material. There's excellent books on World War II aircraft, particularly the B-17, that you can go through, including some of the original pilot manuals, which is actually what I used. And I used a figure previously that showed the throttle pedestal, and there'll be a figure I'm not going to spoil later on that actually shows something else relevant to what I'm doing. You'll see it. It's pretty fascinating. And the rest of that document is pretty handy for the remainder of this video as well. One of the last things I'll probably point out before I go ahead and just throw some music on for the rest of this video is these areas here that I'm currently painting in the video are actually the flight control cables. So B-17s are entirely mechanically controlled by the flight control yoke. That yoke pulls and pushes cables to actuate the flight control surfaces themselves. I've seen in Memphis Belle where it requires 2 of them to pull out of that dive. Yeah, that's just because of the amount of strength it would take to overcome the airflow trying to resist that flight control movement. And so understanding that and how those cables are routed is a good thing for the B-17 because the cables are visible in the internal structure. They are routed through the top of the bomb bay. And so in the next part, you'll actually see that I did route flight control cables just for a little bit more realism and a little bit more detail. Otherwise, we're going to go through, paint all the hydraulic lines up. And again, just pointing out, hydraulic systems, there's a running joke in the aviation community of when it stops leaking, that's when there's a problem because it means you're out of fluid in whatever reservoir. And so, you're going to leak hydraulic fluid in these things, so definitely do a panel line wash, right? Hydraulic fluid is an oil. It will leak out. It'll start to attract dirt, grime, and build up, and it'll cause a lot of dirt into the panels. And as it flows, it takes that dirt with it, especially down tight crevices, so that you can't clean it out. Not that the crews of these aircraft were cleaning them much anyway, other than what was strictly required to make them livable and keep them in the air. So I think that's about the last thing I'm going to go ahead and say. The rest of the video, just enjoy, and I'll go ahead and leave you with some music. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you don't mind. If you want to say hi, shoot me a comment. Enjoy the rest of your day.
again.